So, having said that, I think it's a good time to elaborate more on the topics that you have covered and the topics that are going to cause quite a strong headache to the shipping industry for the decades to come. And I will start from Arthur. Discussing about the cost of the transition for shipping and the cost of decarbonization. So we have seen several studies, and your reference to an amount of 1.65 trillion needed to support the decarbonization struggle in shipping. And noting that much of this amount will be heading to bunkering and shoreside infrastructure. In the past, we have seen many regulations that demanded support from the shore industry and ports and port infrastructure not materializing despite low cost, despite capex of quite a lower magnitude. So what makes us think that this time the shore infrastructure will and the shore investment will follow shipping needs? So what is your view, Arthur?
It's a great question. If I'm going to reference the study that Charlotte mentioned as well on Trafigura and the proposal to have a financial incentive and a levy on the bunkers used, that's going to need to be part of the solution. If we take a step back, we need to keep in mind that shipping is a very cost-orientated industry, and no one is going to go for the greener solution unless it's the cheaper solution. Now, what's different this time is that we do have momentum on our side from big oil majors. We've seen this week Shell, BP announce not only job cuts, but a transition toward being called energy majors. So they're also going to help with that cost. And 1.65 trillion is a scary number. It's a huge number. But if you break it down by all the oil majors in the world, all the trading houses, all the ship owners and the ports, it can become much more manageable. And if tomorrow Shell stops trading oil and starts trading hydrogen, well, the shipping industry is going to follow as well. So to answer your question, we're going to need regulations that provide financial stimulus to it. We're going to need a financial incentive for people to switch to the greener solution. And I think we have the momentum of the industry that is also transitioning and will help go towards the right direction.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. And I'm moving on to a different topic for Charlotte. And my question is the following. We have seen a number of studies focusing on the pricing of alternative fuels. And of course, what we see today, if what we see today is the real truth, it will take us lots of time to transit to this new reality. So unless there are incentives in place, pricing will not be on our side in driving the transition forward. So my question would be, in so many studies, we have seen many assumptions as far as forecasting of future pricing is concerned. So what are the assumptions we need to be aware of and be cautious of, especially when we're talking about fuels like hydrogen, ammonia, areas where things are not concrete yet, not mature yet in terms of production processes and scale?
Yes, of course. Well, this topic is actually extremely interesting. For personally our in-house hydrogen assessments, we have already two different sets of assessments depending on different assumptions. So the first one will take into account fixed operating costs for these hydrogen plants And depending on how you produce hydrogen, you would also factor in the feedstock price. So if it's brown hydrogen, you have to take into account the fossil fuel cost. If it's green hydrogen, you need to take into account the electricity cost, because that needs an extremely big amount of electricity to be produced. So this that's one of the ways we do it. The other way is by pricing what we've seen in terms of trading already, but it's relatively illiquid. So that's why we decided to go for this dual approach. I think that why you're seeing so many different estimates is also because people take into account what will be the government incentives in the future. In Europe, you see that 5 countries have a really strong hydrogen plan for the future. So taking into account these incentives, you can also factor in how much of this energy will be subsidized and how much this will reduce your production costs as, yes, in general for the future. So I believe this is also one of the reasons why we're seeing very different estimates. It's not necessarily helpful for the industry at the moment, but as more countries come up with bolder plans with regards to a hydrogen strategy, for instance, I believe that these differences between estimates will narrow eventually.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. And Arthur, do you also have a view on the alternatives and how away we stand today from real pricing of tangible pricing that can be used for investment decisions on alternatives today?
I think an important point that was touched upon there was liquidity. So as the amount of cargoes increase on the water with these fuels, that's going to help with the problem. I actually think it's Bloomberg that reported today or yesterday the first cargo of blue ammonia going from Saudi Arabia to Japan. So, you know, we are getting those cargoes on the water. These are going to allow traders to have an idea as to where their price stands, and then of the market to react and increase the supply as the one increases, and help at least with the transparency of that pricing. Now, whether that will be a competitive price point for shipping market participants, that is another story.
Yeah. All right. What about, have you come across what we call the fossil pathways and potential solutions, technology solutions that can render the fossil fuel pathway sustainable pathway, like for example carbon capture? And so what is your view on these particular solutions, because they're practically competitive to the alternative fuel solution? So Charlotte, would you take the lead on this one?
Yes, of course. So I believe that the carbon capture solution is definitely something that we are going to be seeing in the medium term. One real reason is, for instance, what do you do with all these ship owners that have installed scrubbers, let's say? They have invested a lot. If you think a retrofit of a scrubber is around 3 million for the largest ships, the VLCCs. But however, keeping this 3.5% with a scrubber might not be compliant with the aims of 2030. So how do you balance this, having asked for big investments and then all of a sudden saying, oh, but it's not okay, so you have to scrap your vessel? I believe that carbon capture technologies will be useful for these types of tankers that have already made an investment, but they would definitely need to reduce their carbon footprint to be able to continue operate after 2030.
Thank you, Charlotte. Arthur, your view on carbon capture?
Yeah, I mean, it's right. You put a little hat on top of your exhaust, and that gets recycled back into your ship, and used as a fuel. I think that's definitely a technology that the industry should explore. Also, to think that hydrogen is one of those fuels or alternative fuels that can potentially be produced from that method as well. I think it has tremendous potential, and we can imagine a lot of applications for it to help us decarbonizing the industry.
Yeah. All right. So I will now move on to a different story. We used to talk about the propulsive energy used for shipping. And we as LR, we have recently embarked on a project and granted an approval in principle for an oil tanker design that can be fueled by ammonia, so a zero carbon fuel. But still, this vessel will be carrying oil, so fossil hydrocarbons. So the question is, how do you expect this transition to impact the commodity trades that we see today, and what will be the future trades that we will see in shipping? Will hydrogen be part of the equation, ammonia, or other alternative fuels? What's your view? So, Charlotte, I will again start from your end.
Sure. Well, there are two things that are interesting in your question. First is the cargo. Second is the fuel. I believe the fuel we've already kind of reached a sort of agreement with regards to the options that are currently available. Definitely, there are a lot of pilot projects, and at the end of the day, it depends on the costs, which ones will allow you to maintain your margins. With regards to the cargo, that's something that already Arthur was mentioning in his presentation. We have an incredible opportunity now with the renewal of the fleet to also reduce perhaps the fleet. Crude will be, if carried, it will be definitely less of it. Same thing goes for products that are being made from the crude. So I believe that this period that we have here of uncertainty with regards to the future and owners delaying the scrapping of the current vessels and waiting until they decide to place an order is a good opportunity to come with strong regulations and also a strong incentive to the market for them to already order some ships that are fueled with different types of definitely powered by different types of fuels, and also reduce the fleet overall. So I think we're at an extremely interesting point in the market, and definitely something that needs to be leveraged by policymakers as well as industry participants.
Arthur, your view on the same question?
Yeah, no, I agree. Cargo and fuel need to be treated separately, and the landscape will potentially look a lot different 10, 15, 20 years down the line. In terms of the actual shipping trade lanes, as I really believe gas is going to be that energy, transition, and with hydrogen as well, at least what we consider blue hydrogen that comes from fossil fuels. The trade lanes shouldn't change much because, in my assumptions, Asia is going to continue being the bulk of that need for consumption. And if you look at your producing area as well, you've got gas in the Mediterranean, in the US and Africa, where you have crude oil today. So not so much maybe as an impact on the shipping lanes or the voyage lengths, even though of course there'll be some small variations there. So we can imagine the producing centers of these new energies to be in the same place. But yes, it completely changes where and how people should invest if you start considering that the cargo carried isn't going to be crude and refined products anymore in 2050.
Yeah, thank you. I have two more questions I would like us to cover. So there is a key question dilemma right now. as far as shipping is concerned and the fuel question, whether we need to have one or two transitions. So what the LNG position in this transition period will be, whether we should opt today for a mitigation, a partial decrease solution, partial mitigation of greenhouse gases solution like LNG under, let's say, the non-methane emissions scenario, or whether we should strengthen our drive towards the final sustainable zero carbon fuels. So what is your view on that question? What should we do today, and how close are we to reaching one transition solution? So I will start from you, Arthur, this time.
It's a very good question. It raises a lot of interesting points. I think maybe the IMO 2020 recent transition didn't produce the best results. Maybe the pandemic got in the way as well. Maybe the loophole in the regulation to allow for a portion of the owners to go with scrubbers as opposed to others was also a fault on the IMO's behalf. So it's not easy, because if we go down the two transition routes, we may be messing up the first one. So we might as well look at the bigger picture and really dedicate all our energies towards this, especially if it's going to take a lot of time. But in this particular case, I think LNG has tremendous potential. I think when it comes to the already existing infrastructure, a lot of infrastructure can be repurposed for that as well. When it comes to its availability, when it comes to its liquidity, when it comes to the fact we have the technology today, we have ships using LNG as their fuel while they're carrying it. We have ships carrying other things also using LNG as a fuel. So I think in this particular case, LNG takes all the boxes.
Thank you, Arthur. Charlotte, your view on the one or two transitions question?
Yeah, so I think Arthur summarized the point pretty well. We need to be bold with incentivization. Mitigating, as IMO 2020 has shown, it wasn't that great of a solution, at least for the aims we're setting ourselves for 2030. However, I'm just wondering whether we are ready to implement the full one transition, the big transition now, given the current infrastructure that we have in terms of like bunkering facilities, in terms of production inland. And I do believe, perhaps I'm wrong, but I'm less of a believer of LNG as a solution on the long term. I believe that this hydrogen, for instance, is a better solution, the green hydrogen, of course. And I think we definitely need to move to renewals. Thing is, it's not possible at the moment. We don't even have hydrogen in the grids working properly in Europe. So it would, before having a solution that can be exported to the shipping market, it has to be already inland. So I do believe that, unfortunately, given the level of development in inland infrastructure, it's a bit impossible to think about already moving forward with the complete transition.
Yeah, thank you. So I will have an attempt to have a last question. There was some momentum, some substantial momentum as far as decarbonization and the energy transition is concerned. Things seem to have changed forever with the COVID pandemic. So right now we have practically, apart from the EU activity on the MRV directive, we have a practical cease of work and regulatory action as far as the energy transition in shipping is concerned. We have a number of considerations and meetings and virtual meetings, but not active steps as we speak. So what is your view on the impact that the pandemic will have on the overall effort? Charlotte, do you want to?
Yes, of course. Well, I think it's a bit complicated here. Every country is really trying to make the ends meet with regards to maintaining an economy that is working. Definitely, we have seen that some projects that I was just looking at, some renewable hydrogen projects, we had 50 announced pilot projects and for 2020. And however, we have only seen 32, and they are really at early stages. So there is definitely a problem with investment being delayed here. And I believe that the coronavirus pandemic has definitely had some bad impact with regards to this. However, it has also shown how crude prices have behaved. It has shown that crude prices can become negative, and it really has kind of changed our assumptions with regards to the energy market. So I do believe that it was both a plus and a con, not a plus with regards to infrastructure, but perhaps a plus with regards to how we're facing energy, what we believe will be the future. We've seen a lot of companies recently coming with plans for the future to really green their emissions, basically, like BP or Shell, or even Trafigura with their most recent paper. So I think it has impacted in both ways.
All right. And Arthur, your final comment?
I agree with that view. I think there's two parts to this answer. The first one is that the COVID pandemic has kind of jolted us into a collective realization when it comes to the environment and to what we need to achieve. Now, I think it's also jolted people into a financial reality, which is with the dire outlook right now for crude prices, they're looking at other options because they just can't sustain their livelihoods. So I think the push towards renewables from these companies is motivated financially, of course. And now with regards to your points on the lack of action, well, the problem is it's the uncertainty, right? Second wave, third wave, vaccine, no vaccine. I think as long as we're in this stage, people are going to rather try to manage the situation rather than take any decisive action that can be unraveled depending on what happens. You know, to end on the more philosophical notes, humans collectively do suffer from short-term memory loss. We've seen that throughout the history. So let's see whether they really use this opportunity to change certain things and take decisive actions there, or whether once everything is back to normal, let's say pre-pandemic, whether we just continue like we did before.
Thank you, Arthur, and thank you both for sharing some quite interesting views. So I think this is the end of this session. Thank you again.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.